My name is Donna Moretti, and I am 60 years old. For most of my life, I have lived quietly in a small seaside town in Sorrento, Italy, working as a hand seamstress. My days once carried the rhythm of simplicity, threading needles, mending garments, and watching the light dance across the blue waters that hugged our coast. At my side was my husband, Luca, a boatmaker whose strong, weathered hands shaped with the way the sea shapes the shore. He was 65, steady as the tide, and for decades our love was the anchor of my world. But everything I thought I knew shattered on the day of his funeral. The church bells had barely stopped tolling, and the scent of lilies still hung heavy in the air, when a message appeared on my phone, its words burning into me like fire. I am still alive. Trust no one, especially not your sons. The number was unknown, the voice behind it invisible, yet I felt Luca's presence in every letter, as though he himself had reached out from beyond the grave. From that moment the ground beneath my life gave way. What followed was not only grief, but a storm of betrayal and secrets. I soon discovered that my own sons, Matteo and Enzo, had turned against our family in ways I could never have imagined. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. I was 22 the first time I met Luca Moretti, and though decades have passed, I can still summon the moment as if it were etched into my skin. It was a bright spring morning in Sorrento, the market alive with the cries of fishermen, the clatter of crates, and the sharp scent of salt and freshly caught anchovies. My basket was nearly too heavy for me to carry, lemons, bread, and a few scraps of fish I had bartered for with the little money I had earned sewing dresses for neighbors. I remember brushing a strand of dark hair from my face, turning toward the sea, and then I saw him. Luca stood among the boats, his shirt rolled to the elbows, forearms browned and calloused from years of carving wood and wrestling with sails. There was something steady in the way he moved, as though the sea itself bent to his rhythm. When he noticed me staring, he did not look away. Instead, he smiled wide, unguarded, warm, and in that instant my heart gave way. "Would you like to see something beautiful?" he asked. His voice was rough but kind, touched by the salt air. He led me to a small wooden boat, newly finished, polished until it gleamed in the sunlight. "I built her myself," he said with quiet pride. Then, without ceremony, he helped me climb aboard, steadying my arm with his strong hands. We pushed off into the water, and as the market faded behind us, Sorrento revealed a softer face. The cliffs glowed in the sinking light, the horizon bathed in hues of rose and gold. We drifted silently for a while, and then Luca turned to me. His smile, honest, simple, utterly unpretentious, broke something inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt both seen and safe. We married a year later. Our wedding was modest, held in the same stone church where generations of our families had been baptized and buried. There were no grand feasts or jeweled gowns, only music, laughter, and the scent of lemon blossoms woven into my veil. Afterward, we settled into a weathered stone house near the water's edge. Its walls were uneven, its roof leaked when it rained, but to me it was a palace. The waves outside our window sang to us each night, and every morning, sunlight poured through the shutters, filling the rooms with a gentle promise of life shared. We did not have riches, but we had each other. Luca worked long hours at the boatyard, shaping vessels for fishermen who trusted his craftsmanship more than the tides themselves. I stitched clothes, repaired curtains, and sometimes spent weeks bent over a single wedding gown. My fingers raw but my heart full. Our evenings were simple. Fresh bread dipped in olive oil, grilled fish when we could afford it, laughter at the smallest things. And in time our greatest joys arrived, our sons. Matteo was born in 1988. His eyes the same startling blue as Luca's, as if the sea had lent him its color. 2 years later came Enzo, who carried my smile but his father's quiet determination. I remember Luca holding them both, one after the other, with tears slipping down his weathered cheeks. We were poor, yes, but in those years our home rang with laughter and the kind of love money cannot buy. Raising them was not easy. The workshop paid little, and my sewing barely covered the rest. There were winters when the pantry held almost nothing but flour and dried beans. Yet we never let the boys feel the weight of our struggle. Luca told them stories of the sea, how every wave carried secrets from distant lands. I told them stories of resilience, of women who sewed not only clothes but futures. Together we gave them everything we could. But children do not always grow into the dreams of their parents. As Matteo grew older, ambition burned within him like a fever. He was clever, restless, never content with our quiet life. At 15, he asked me one night why we did not live like the Bianchis, a wealthy family who owned villas high above the cliffs. Why don't we have a big house, Mama? Why don't we have cars and servants? His voice dripped with disdain, as though our small home were a prison. I tried to explain that happiness was not measured by marble floors or silk curtains, but he rolled his eyes, already lost to dreams of something grander. Enzo, softer by nature, once followed his father like a shadow. But the older he grew, the more he looked to Matteo for guidance. He learned to sneer at Luca's rough hands, to mock my frugal meals. They wanted more than what we could give, and their distance grew like a crack across stone. The deepest wound came when Matteo, newly turned 18, refused to work alongside his father at the boatyard. "Why should I waste my life with wood and salt?" he spat. "It's filthy work. I'll never end up like you." That night, I found Luca sitting on the porch long after dark, his broad shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the sea. He said nothing, but I saw the pain he carried. His life's work, his pride, dismissed by his own son. It was as if the waves themselves had betrayed him. In time, both Matteo and Enzo left for Naples, lured by the promise of the city. They rose quickly, trading in property, learning the language of power and profit. Soon they were driving sleek cars and wearing suits that cost more than Luca's entire workshop earned in a month. When they returned to visit, their eyes carried something I could only describe as pity. Pity for us, their small-town, small-minded parents. "Mother, father," Matteo said once, standing in our kitchen like a stranger, "you should sell this house. It's falling apart." He didn't understand. That house was not crumbling stone. It was our life. It was the dinners by candlelight when the electricity failed. It was the lullabies sung against the crash of waves. It was the place where I sewed bridal gowns for half the town, where Luca told bedtime stories about boats that sailed beyond the horizon. To me, those walls held the soul of everything we had built together. But Matteo only saw decay. Enzo, silent at his side, did not defend us. Tension grew heavier after Matteo married Sofia, a woman from Naples whose elegance seemed carved from glass. She looked at our home as if it were a ruin unworthy of her presence. When I prepared grilled fish one evening, hoping to share a taste of our sea with her, she pushed the plate away. "Thank you," she said coolly, "but I'm on a diet." Her words cut sharper than any blade, not because she refused the meal, but because she refused the love behind it. Enzo, though unmarried, followed suit. His visits became shorter, his eyes glued to his phone. "Sorry, Mama, business," he would mutter, silencing me mid-sentence to take a call. I would sit with my hands folded, waiting, while he spoke to faceless voices that seemed to matter more than my own. Slowly our weekends, once filled with laughter, stories, and the scent of Luca's grilled sardines, vanished. In their place were hurried visits, stiff embraces, and the ache of knowing that somewhere along the way, we had lost our sons. The real trouble began when Matteo and Enzo started pressing us with a persistence that felt less like concern and more like a siege. Day after day, their words circled back to the same demands. Sell the house, change the insurance, prepare for a future that felt more like an execution than retirement. "Father is getting old. He should rest," Matteo said one afternoon, laying a stack of neatly printed documents on the table as though they were gifts. His tone was not affectionate but calculated, smooth in the way of men who spend their lives in boardrooms. "Sell the house. I'll help you find a better place, something modern with proper care. A retirement facility." That word facility struck me like a slap. To them, the stone house by the sea, with its uneven floors and stubborn shutters, was nothing but a liability. To me, it was the keeper of our lives, the witness of every struggle and every joy. My throat tightened, but before I could speak, Luca did. "This is our home," he said simply, his voice calm but unyielding. We are not going anywhere. Matteo's jaw tightened, Enzo's gaze flicked away, and the room fell into a silence heavier than lead. I looked at my husband then, at the quiet firmness in his eyes, but also at the shadow that lingered there, an unease I had never seen before. In the weeks that followed, I noticed small changes in Luca. He grew restless, sleeping less, pacing the veranda at night as the waves crashed against the rocks below. His once steady hands trembled when he thought I wasn't watching. One night, 3 weeks before the tragedy, he reached for my hand in bed. His grip was tighter than usual, his eyes clouded. Donna, he whispered, if anything happens to me, you must be careful. I don't trust Matteo and Enzo anymore. The words chilled me, but I brushed them away, convincing myself it was only worry gnawing at him in his old age. I told him he was imagining shadows where there were none. Yet those words lingered, like a thorn in the back of my mind, waiting for the moment to pierce. That moment came sooner than I could have ever feared. It was a bright morning, sunlight spilling across the kitchen as I prepared Luca's favorite meal, fish stew, simmering gently in a clay pot. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air when the phone rang. I answered casually, but the voice on the other end was strange, mechanical almost. There has been an accident at the boatyard. An explosion. Gas leak. My world stopped. The spoon clattered from my hand, splashing broth across the counter. I didn't ask questions. I didn't wait. I ran. By the time I reached the hospital, Matteo and Enzo were already there. I froze in the corridor, breathless with fear and confusion. No one had told them, at least not through me. How had they arrived so quickly? Their suits were immaculate, their expressions controlled, as though they had been waiting. Luca lay in the ICU, his body wrapped in bandages, swollen and bruised beyond recognition. Only his hand was free, resting limply on the white sheets. I rushed to his side, clutching it as though I could anchor him back to me. And then, faintly, impossibly, I felt it, a squeeze. Just the smallest pressure, like a whisper through touch. My heart leapt. He's here, I cried. He's trying to say something. But the doctors, their faces a mask of clinical detachment, dismissed it. Only a reflex, one said, scribbling notes as if my hope were nothing more than a nuisance. For 3 days I lived by his bedside, sleeping in a chair, holding his hand, praying to a God who seemed silent. Matteo and Enzo came and went, their visits brisk, their conversations hushed in corners where I could not hear. On the 3rd day, as dawn broke pale and cold, Luca slipped away. The world blurred. The sound of waves, the smell of salt, even my own heartbeat seemed to vanish into a hollow silence. I thought I would be given time to mourn, but Matteo and Enzo swept in like businessmen closing a deal. Within hours, they arranged the funeral. It was hurried, stripped bare of the warmth Luca deserved. No procession, no music, only a handful of attendees gathered under a gray sky. It was as though they wanted to bury not only his body but his memory. Father liked privacy, Matteo said firmly when I questioned the starkness of it all. His eyes dared me to argue, his voice leaving no room for doubt. But I knew it was a lie. Luca had been beloved in Sorrento. Fishermen trusted him, neighbors greeted him warmly, children ran to hear his stories. A man like Luca did not die quietly, forgotten in shadows. No, this was not respect. It was something else entirely, something darker, deliberate. And though I stood there with the earth fresh on his grave, my heart broken in pieces, a seed of suspicion rooted itself deep inside me. The cemetery was quiet except for the sea wind drifting over the marble stones. I knelt on the damp earth in front of Luca's grave, fingers pressing into the soil as though I could anchor myself to the world that had slipped away. The scent of fresh lilies and salt clung to the air. I whispered his name under my breath, a sound so small it barely existed. That was when my phone vibrated. I almost didn't look. People send condolences, I thought. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart stopped. I'm still alive. Don't trust anyone, especially your sons. For a long second I couldn't breathe. My fingers went cold, and the phone trembled in my palm. I typed back before thinking, words spilling from my panic. Who are you? The reply came instantly like a breath against my neck. They are watching. Don't trust Matteo and Enzo. The letters blurred. My hand shook so violently I dropped the phone. the sound of it striking the gravel sharp and final. My pulse pounded in my ears. Around me the cemetery remained still, rows of stone crosses catching the light. But I felt as if the ground beneath me had tilted. From that moment, everything became a hunt. Every memory, every small detail began to unravel under a new and terrible light. Why had Matteo and Enzo arrived at the hospital so quickly the day of the explosion? No one had called them, not me, not the doctors. Why had none of Luca's co-workers from the boatyard attended his funeral, though they had always filled our home with laughter and stories? Questions churned inside me like dark water. Back at the house, I went to Luca's papers. I had not touched them since his death, but now my hands tore through drawers and folders with the desperation of someone trying to wake from a nightmare. That was when I found it. Policy I had never seen before. Luca's life insurance, once only 10,000 euros, had been increased to 100,000 just months ago. He had never told me. Another policy for workplace accidents, 50,000 euros, purchased days before his death. My stomach knotted. Then I opened our joint bank account. 8,000 euros withdrawn without my knowledge. The signature on the form was Luca's, but wrong somehow, shaky, uneven, a stranger wearing his name. My phone vibrated again. Check the boatyard. Look in the drawer of Luca's desk. The words chilled me. Whoever this was, they knew things, knew Luca, knew where to send me. I went. The boatyard had always been a place of sawdust and salt, of hammers ringing against wood. Now it was silent. I expected scorched walls, splintered beams, some trace of the explosion that had supposedly taken Luca's life. Instead, everything was immaculate. Clean surfaces. No burn marks. No shards of glass. No smell of gas. The desk stood in the corner, the top polished, a layer of dust undisturbed. I pulled the drawer open, my breath ragged. Inside lay a single envelope addressed to me in Luca's hand. Donna, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me. The words blurred as my eyes filled. Matteo and Enzo pressured me to sign papers saying it was to protect you. But I feel something is wrong. Be careful. I sat down hard on the stool, the letter trembling in my grip. My sons. Our sons. Luca had feared them. The man who had once carried Matteo on his shoulders and taught Enzo to tie knots was warning me against them from beyond the grave. My phone vibrated again. Another message. Go to Cafe del Porto. Ask for Giovanni. I followed the instructions because I didn't know what else to do. My life had collapsed into a series of commands from a faceless voice, and yet it was the only thing that felt real. Cafe del Porto was a small cafe near the docks, the kind of place where fishermen stop for espresso at dawn. When I entered, the bell above the door chimed softly. At a corner table sat a man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a leather notebook in front of him. He stood when he saw me. Signora Moretti, he said quietly. I'm Giovanni Rossi. We sat. My hands were still trembling when I clutched the cup of coffee he ordered for me. The bitterness grounded me just enough to speak. Who are you? I'm a private investigator, he said. Luca hired me. The room tilted again. Luca? Yes. He suspected your sons. Giovanni opened his notebook, revealing pages of neat handwriting, photographs tucked into the margins. He wanted proof before he confronted them. He believed they were planning something. Giovanni reached into his bag and took out a small recorder. Listen. He pressed play. Static hissed, then voices emerged, Matteo's and Enzo's unmistakable. A little methanol in his coffee, Matteo's voice said, low but steady. Just enough to make it look like a stroke. Enzo murmured agreement. He won't suspect a thing. We'll say it's vitamins. He drinks coffee every morning. I covered my mouth, a sound escaping that was half gasp, half sob. They were going to poison him? My voice cracked. Giovanni's eyes were grim. They already tried. The symptoms he had, the dizziness, the tremors, those weren't age or stress. They were early doses. He came to me because he suspected. He thought he could outsmart them long enough to protect you. Giovanni pressed another button. A second recording played. And after her, Enzo's voice this time sharper. We'll say she was depressed. Everyone knows she's fragile since father's death. It will look like suicide. The coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. They were planning to kill me too, I whispered. Giovanni nodded once, slowly. Luca believed it. He gave me everything he had: bank records, insurance policies, even photographs. He told me to find you if something happened. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Matteo at a hardware store 40 kilometers away, purchasing containers labeled methanol. There were financial documents showing Matteo had lost 80,000 euros in a failed real estate deal, while Enzo was drowning in 50,000 euros of gambling debt. They saw the insurance as their way out, Giovanni said softly. Your husband increased the policy under pressure. He may have signed other papers he didn't understand. He tried to protect you, but he ran out of time. The cafe around us faded to a blur of movement and sound, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of spoons, while inside me a storm gathered. Grief, betrayal, rage. My sons had become strangers. Worse than strangers, they had become predators. I closed the folder slowly. My hands no longer trembled. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Luca asked me to, Giovanni said. And because you're in danger. The insurance money is not the end. They think you're vulnerable, that you'll sign what they give you. They may try again. I stared down at the photographs: Matteo's face, Enzo's face. Faces I had kissed 1,000 times, now twisted by greed. My whole life narrowed to a single point of clarity. They won't, I said quietly. Not anymore. The seed of suspicion that had taken root at Luca's grave had now grown into something else entirely. A resolve. Outside, the sea glinted under the afternoon sun, calm on its surface but hiding currents below. I slipped the folder into my bag, the weight of it heavy against my side. My life had been stolen piece by piece, my husband, my home, my sons. But now I had something back. The truth. And the truth, I knew, was only the beginning. I walked into the Sorrento police station with Giovanni at my side, the morning sun slanting through the dusty glass panes. My hands were trembling, but I held on tightly to the envelope that carried everything: recordings, photographs, bank statements, and Luca's letter. In the small interview room, we were greeted by Lieutenant Carlo Bianchi, a man with a weathered face and eyes that softened when he heard my name. He had been Luca's childhood friend, the one who used to help repair boats in summer. Now, his uniform carried the weight of authority. When I spread the evidence across the table, Bianchi's expression hardened. He listened silently to the recordings of Matteo and Enzo planning the poisoning, his jaw tightening at each word. When the photograph of Matteo buying methanol appeared, his fist came down softly on the desk. I can't believe this, he murmured. Your sons. Luca's sons. But he didn't hesitate. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, We're getting a warrant tonight. We'll move before dawn. The next morning, Sorrento awoke to the echo of sirens. Police cars rolled quietly into the narrow street where Matteo and Enzo lived. I stood back with Giovanni, watching from across the piazza, my heart thudding so loudly I thought it might break my ribs. Matteo opened the door in his work clothes, eyes still heavy with sleep. For a moment he tried to bluff, demanding to know why they were there. But when Bianchi played the first recording, the unmistakable sound of his own voice describing vitamin powder, his knees buckled. He sat on the steps, hands shaking, the color draining from his face. Enzo, however, reacted differently. When the officers moved in, he bolted out the back door, darting through the narrow alleys that wound toward the harbor. I watched as 2 plainclothes policemen chased him down. He stumbled after only a few streets and fell hard on the cobblestones. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed like a gavel in my mind. The trial began within weeks. For 3 days, the courthouse overflowed with locals and reporters. Sorrento had never seen such a spectacle. 2 brothers accused of plotting their father's murder, and their mother's as well. I stood before the jury, a black shawl wrapped around my shoulders, and told them about Luca. His laugh, his patience, the smell of sawdust on his skin. My voice shook but never broke as I described the betrayal that had shattered our home. When the recordings were played in court, an audible gasp rippled through the room. Some jurors covered their mouths. Others stared at Matteo and Enzo with a mixture of pity and disgust. The prosecutor laid out the debts, the insurance policies, the methanol purchase. By the 3rd day, no one doubted the truth. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Matteo and Enzo were sentenced to life in prison. I felt no victory, only a numb, quiet exhaustion. As the guards led them away, Matteo turned once to look at me. His lips trembled as if he wanted to speak, but the door closed before any words came out. Weeks passed. Then a letter arrived from Matteo. He wrote that debt had swallowed him whole and that Sophia had urged him into the plan, whispering about the only way out. He said he was sorry. I stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it and slid it back into its envelope. I never wrote back. A month later, news came that Matteo had taken his own life in prison. Enzo, left alone, fell into a deep depression, haunted by what they had done. Sophia disappeared from Sorrento, leaving behind only gossip and a stained reputation. I used the insurance money, blood money some might call it, to found the Luca Moretti Foundation, a small but determined charity that offers shelter and legal aid to victims of family-based violence. Our old house, once heavy with shadows, is now a garden filled with wildflowers. Every Sunday, I cut fresh blooms and take them to Luca's grave. Standing there, I feel the sea breeze from the cliffs and imagine him smiling somewhere beyond my sight. Giovanni visits often. We sit in the kitchen over strong coffee and pastries, talking about ordinary things: the weather, the harbor, a new case he's working on. He never pries about my grief, and I never ask about his loneliness, but a quiet friendship has taken root between us, steady and reliable. I no longer feel the same ache for Matteo and Enzo. Their choices carved a path I cannot follow. Yet I have found a strange peace, knowing that truth prevailed, that Luca's death was not swallowed by lies. In the stillness of the garden, with the sound of waves rising from below, I sense Luca's pride, as if he is standing just behind me, his calloused hands resting lightly on my shoulders. And I live on, steadfast, unbroken, and at last free. When I look back on everything that happened, the betrayal, the courtroom, the nights I spent staring into the dark wondering where I went wrong, I realize that grief alone did not shape me. What truly changed me were the lessons I was forced to learn. These are not simply my lessons. They are truths I hope you carry with you, because life will test us all in ways we cannot imagine. Lesson 1. Trust is precious, but it must not be blind. I loved my sons more than life itself. I trusted them because they were mine, born of my own body. Yet I learned that even those closest to us can make choices that tear everything apart. This does not mean we must live in suspicion, but it does mean we must open our eyes. Trust should be built on honesty, not assumed simply because of blood or titles. Lesson 2. The truth always finds its way through shadows. For weeks I felt like I was drowning in lies, each one pulling me deeper. But no matter how carefully Matteo and Enzo tried to bury the evidence, it surfaced. Luca's letter, the recordings, the photographs, all of it came to light. Truth has a strange power. It waits patiently, then reveals itself at the moment it is most needed. Hold fast to it and it will set you free. Lesson 3. Pain can be transformed into purpose. Losing Luca broke me. Discovering my son's betrayal nearly destroyed me. But in the ashes of that devastation, I found a way to help others. The Luca Moretti Foundation is more than a charity. It is my way of telling the world that love can outlast betrayal. Whatever wounds life inflicts, you have the power to transform them into something that brings light to others. Lesson 4. Justice is not vengeance but clarity. When I sat in that courtroom, I did not want revenge. What I wanted was for the truth to be spoken aloud, for the lies to be stripped away so that Luca's name would not be stained by falsehood. Justice gave me that clarity. It is not about punishing for the sake of punishing. It is about making sure the truth has the last word. Lesson 5. Healing is not forgetting. It is choosing peace. I still remember Matteo's face as he was led away, and Enzo's voice echoing in that courtroom. Those memories will never vanish. But healing does not require erasing them. Healing is the choice to no longer let pain dictate the rest of my life. In my garden with flowers blooming and the sea stretching endlessly beyond, I choose peace every single day. So my dear listener, if my story has touched you, if these lessons echo in your own heart, I ask you to carry them forward. Let them remind you that you are stronger than betrayal, wiser than lies, and capable of rebuilding, even after the worst storms. And before you leave, let me ask for one small favor. If you found meaning in my journey, please like this video, share it with someone who might need its message, and subscribe to the channel so that more voices, more stories, and more lessons can reach those still searching in the dark. Because none of us are alone. And sometimes the story of one broken heart becoming whole again is the light someone else needs to keep going.